Let's talk about Amazon Simple Storage Service or Amazon S3 for short. Amazon S3 is one of the first few services which AWS has started offering to public. I guess it was live in 2006, so it has come a long way. It doesn't mean it has become old and not getting any new features. Every now and then you would hear this new functionality has been added, and it has evolved a lot over period of time, catering to different customers' needs. There are a lot of things which we could do with Amazon S3. We will focus on some of the concept. As I said, it has been into play for a long time. There are a huge number of feature and development happened with S3. We will focus on some of the core component to get us started, and depending on the use case, we can utilize S3 for different purposes. So let's get started with Amazon Simple Storage Service or S3. To understand S3, we have to first understand concept of buckets and object. Now, you can clearly relate a concept of folder and files to understand bucket and object. In your laptop or desktop, when you are trying to store some files, probably to make them easy to identify and find, you would store them into folders. Folder is the outer boundary in which you would be keeping files, let's say a folder for images, another folder for videos, another folder for document, and that's how you would be storing your files. In Amazon S3, the concept of folder is what similar thing is bucket. If I go with the formal definition, buckets are containers for data stored in S3. They keep the data, and inside that bucket, we keep objects, and objects are the fundamental entity stored in Amazon S3. So to get started, you would first need to create a bucket, and once the bucket is ready, you could start hosting objects inside it, and we would be doing the same into AWS console in a minute. Right? So compare bucket is like a folder and object is like a file for a traditional compute workload. Let's get started into console and create a bucket, and we would store some objects inside it. Sorry. So I'm going here, signing into the console, and from there I would create a bucket first and then object. Now, if I come to service here S3, the name itself says that it is a scalable storage in the cloud. Why it is scalable? Because it offers you virtually unlimited storage. You could keep as much data as you want inside, and we would just start by creating a bucket first. Now, when I have to create bucket, I have to specify some basic details, and those basic details will define how my bucket would be storing the data. I'm keeping things simple here. I won't go into all technical detail in this module, but we will talk about other features in the next modules. So let me create a bucket. Now, as soon as I create a bucket, you would see one change happens here, that it becomes global. Before that, if I was just on to AWS Management Console, not going into S3, this was showing me the region where I am connected to. So currently I am connected to Northern Virginia. And as soon as I say, hey, I want to use Amazon S3, if I go this place, it would automatically change to global. What it indicates that S3 namespace is global. So whenever I have to create a bucket, I have to identify it by a name, and that name has to be globally unique. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to create a S3 bucket. Let's try that. So I go ahead here and say I want to create a bucket. I won't explain every option right now, but we will come to them as and when required. So my bucket name, let me try to create a bucket called test, and I do not go through all these settings. I just select I'm fine with the basic setting which is given to me, the default setting, and I say create a bucket. And obviously I get an error because this bucket with the same name already exists. Now whether it exists into Northern Virginia or somewhere, it doesn't matter. Buckets would be a regional entity. So the namespace is global, but whenever a bucket is created, you could select specific regions and then start building your application or data, storing data there shouldn't be a problem. So I will make it unique. Let's say learning AWS, and today's date is 02/02/2023, sorry, to just make it unique. And I'm selecting region Northern Virginia for it, and I would say done. Go ahead and create a bucket for me. What happens now that AWS would refer this as a bucket, the name which I have given, and it would keep object in this bucket only within Northern Virginia region. It can be accessed from outside if you want to, but physically the data is stored within Northern Virginia region. Unless you specify, those objects won't be copied to another region automatically, because maybe you selected Northern Virginia to fulfill a compliance, so AWS would never be automatically copying your data to a different region. But if you want, you can. Once my bucket is ready, next thing I could do is go ahead and start creating objects inside it. So objects are your fundamental entities stored in Amazon S3. I could go ahead and upload my object. I can create here folder structure if I want to. More on this in a minute. Let me go ahead and upload an object. If you see, there is an option which says upload. It doesn't say create an object. So I would have my object ready, and then I would upload it into Amazon S3. Let's take a very simple notepad file, a text file, and I would store it. So I would call it, this is my object. Done. And let me save it locally. I'm saving this object locally on my desktop, calling it object1. And once saved, I would go ahead and say I want to upload this. I would select upload, and I would be adding the file which we have just created on desktop, which is object1.txt. It will show me the size of file and where it will be going into, permission, properties, and everything, and I would upload it. As soon as this upload finishes, obviously it took very short time because it's a smaller file, I would get a message saying yes, everything is fine, upload completed, and that object is being shown to me here. It identified the type of the object. If I click on this object now, I should be able to see a unique identifier for that object. So there is a unique identifier that is referred as object URL. Let me copy it into Notepad so that we can inspect it in a easier fashion. So this one is HTTPS, the protocol, the bucket name, service, amazonaws.com/object1.txt. That's how we identify an object. This is a unique identifier for the object. If I am going to open this object, obviously I should be getting an error, and it makes sense. X is denied. We don't want objects to become public automatically, and that's why S3 default setting is no object is made public unless you specify so. How to make an object public, we will see that in a minute, but let's focus on some additional component associated with Amazon S3. So hope this thing is clear, that what is a bucket and what is an object and how to upload an object to a bucket. You could upload multiple objects also. We will talk about multiple ways of uploading object too. Let's focus on the next component here, which says durability is 99.99999, which we are referring as something called 11 nines of durability, and then availability is referred as 99.9x. I would talk about why I am putting a x here, because there are different storage tiers into S3, and depending on which tier you use, your availability will be different, but durability would remain the same. So let's try to understand what is durability and what is availability. I'll go to a blackboard, and explain these concepts so that you can have a better idea on that. Let's say this is an office building. Let's say I work here. Now, office buildings mostly would have a time to open and time to close, right? So let's say this building opens at 5 a.m. into the morning, and let's say closes at 11 p.m. Right? I forgot my laptop here. So my laptop is there. I realize about that at around 11:30. Can I go into this building right now? Answer is no, because the building is shut. My laptop is not stolen, it is still there, but I can't access it right now. How this relates to durability and availability? Let me write down it first and I'll explain it. Durability and availability. If I could put simple meaning in English here, I would say durability means retention and availability is responsible for access. Let's see this thing here. So my laptop is still there. It is not stolen. It is not it has not vanished. It is still there. So it is retained for me. That is durability. But can I access it right now at 11:30? Answer for that is no, and that is your availability. What it means in terms of Amazon S3, let's see that. So let's say you created a S3 bucket. In that S3 bucket, you have stored an object, and now you want to access that object, right? This S3 bucket would be in some region, exactly. Now, what happens behind the scene? As soon as you create an object, S3 service would create three copies of that object. So for you and me, it is looking like one copy or one object. Behind the scene, S3 has created three copies of object, three physically distinct copies, same object. That would ensure that even if one of the copies gone, deleted, or caught fire or something happened, I still have my data my data is still stored in a durable fashion. So that is what we mean by durability is 11 nines. If you quantify this durability, some numbers is like if you put some numbers on this 11 nines, that comes out to be like if you store, let's say, 10 billion files into Amazon S3 service, maybe over a period of 10,000 years, one file may get lost. So it is very rare chance of a file getting vanished from Amazon S3 as a service. So that is a durability which is called 11 nines, which we could get from S3. And how we could get it? Because the service is keeping three copies of our data. So let's say all three copies obviously would stay within a region. So there is a copy 1, copy 2, and copy 3. This region is, let's say, Northern Virginia. Let's say for whatever reason the connectivity to Northern Virginia is disrupted. Like I could not go into the building because it has a time and I am beyond that time. So my connectivity is gone. It doesn't mean that my file got deleted. File is there. As soon as my connectivity would be established, my object would be available to me again, and that is what we mean by availability. So availability relates to access of the data, whereas durability relates to retention of the data. So hopefully it is clear to you what is durability and what is availability. So as soon as you store an object, S3 would create multiple copies of it, and they would be stored within the same region, not beyond the region, and you can access those by one single URL which we got as an object name, and behind the scene service would take care of its durability and availability. I hope this thing is clear. Let's go back and talk a little bit more on Amazon S3. So S3 is a service in which you can create bucket, and in bucket you could create object. Every object will get its a unique name. I showed you uploading one object, but let's go ahead and upload bunch of object, and then I'll show you the folder structure of Amazon S3. Now, doing manual object upload one by one from management console may not be best thing. It will take a lot of time. Best would be I utilize some command line to upload huge number of objects. And this is just an example. You may still leverage management console if you want to, and you do not need to remember commands. I am just showing you a easy way to upload some of the object into S3 as a service. So I am into command prompt on my Windows machine. I'll go to a directory which I have is called temp, and there I have a folder which is called static website. If I look here, I have different files inside it. There are some CSS directory, fonts directory, images, index file, index.html. My intention is to copy all these files to the Amazon S3 bucket, which we have just created. So let's go ahead and start that. For that, I am using AWS command line utility. I have already installed this. Obviously, I would need some credentials to connect to AWS service at the backend. So I have AWS CLI installed. It is just an example. You do not have to follow this as it is. I am saying now AWS, I want to invoke S3 as a command and I want to copy. So the short syntax here is CP, stands for copy. Copy syntax is very simple. You would specify what is the source of your data and you will say what is your destination of your data. That is the very simple syntax. Copy from source to destination. In this case, my source is the directory where I am right now. So I would represent it with a dot. So I want to copy all the files where I am currently, where to the service which is S3, and then I would provide the name of the bucket we have created. Let's see what was the name. I hope I remember it. Learning AWS 02022023. If everything is fine, what would happen now? S3 my command would execute and it would start copying all my files to S3 service. I made a mistake here. Uploaded that file to S3. Parameter validation failed, invalid length of parameter. What I need here, I need to provide maybe one more information which will say recursive. Because there are a lot of files, I just want to copy all of them with the folder structure. So I'm using a higher option called recursive, and hopefully this time it should work and it should start copying all my files to Amazon S3 bucket of my choice. Let it complete and then we would see how it is seen into the console. So all my files are copied. I could check it from here also. I could go ahead and say AWS S3 list ls is the command, and which bucket I am interested to list, I have to specify the details of that. It is a S3 bucket whose name is learning AWS 02022023, and that would display me the list of the object within that bucket. Right. So hopefully this thing is clear. Let me exit from here. Let me go to console and see those objects here. Previously we had only one object, but now I should be able to see the folder structure here. So you could see this is a folder. This is a folder. This is a folder. This is my HTML file, which is of this size. And here is the detail of storage class. We will talk about storage classes in some time. Now, one key distinction here which you should be aware that how S3 actually stores the data. Let me give an example here. Best would be I write it down on a notepad for easy understanding. So I have here one file which is index.html. So that file is within that object is within that S3 bucket. So that is index.html is my object. Done. Inside that or in that bucket, I have a folder called fonts, and inside a fonts folder, I have a folder called flat icon, and inside a flat icon, I have a file called backup.txt. So let me note down this information. So I have a fonts folder, I have a flat icon folder, and I have a file called backup.txt inside it, an object called backup.txt. And similarly, if I go into some other folders, I would find something else. Let's say I go to images, and in images, I have a file called about.jpg, bg1.jpg. So let me note down this too. So this is my images folder, and then there is a file called about.jpg. Now, what is happening here that this is giving me an impression that, hey, this is my bucket first, right? So the idea or impression we are getting here that this is my bucket. In that bucket, we have a file which is called index.html. Okay. Then inside it, we have a folder. And in that folder, what I have fonts directory, that is my fonts folder, and inside fonts I have another folder which is called my flat icon, and in that flat icon I have my backup.txt. This is the impression S3 is giving to me. But for S3, all of these are just objects, or we refer to them like we call them key. So for the first object, the key is index.html. It is a unique identifier of that object. For the second object, the key is this whole name. So for you and me, it feels like a folder structure, but behind the scene, S3 is keeping everything into a flat hierarchy, and that portion is identifying object in a unique key combination. You and me refer them as folder structure, but for S3, it is a key. So this folder structure, which is fonts and images, these are referred as prefixes. So these are prefixes. Prefix name says prefix just before the object they are coming, and they are allowing us to create a folder structure impression, but actually at the back end everything is being stored into a flat structure. So I hope everyone is clear. Now, if I am trying to access any object, I would obviously be getting an error, and every object would get a unique URL. If you remember this one, https my bucket name s3 service images folder about.jpg, I could use this button to copy the URL, try to open it into a browser, and I should be hitting a wall because the access is denied. That is the default behavior of S3. Okay, so to summarize what we have discussed so far, we talked about what is a bucket, which is a container for data, object, which is a fundamental entity similar to a folder and a file. There are bucket and object. The namespace of S3 is global, but the buckets we create are regional. We talked about durability, 11 nines, availability 99.9x%. It depends on different storage tier. I'll talk about them. And now you could see this single page summary of Amazon S3. So I would not read everything for you, but this slide is available to you so that you can refer to it and understand more details about how Amazon S3 works, where it stores data, how it works, what are the ways when you can use it, and how much it may cost. We will talk about some of the feature into the next chapter. So I hope you enjoyed and learned something new. We will connect again into the next chapter. Thank you.